Okay, so we're going to learn about graphing equations in this chapter. And specifically in this section, we're going to be talking about lines. So I think from last year in algebra, hopefully you guys were exposed to this equation y equals mx plus b, where aside from your x and your y, which are your variables for your equation, we have two parameters, m and b. And m, if you recall, represents the slope of your line, which is really telling you how steep it is and in which direction is it going. Is it going up to the right or is it going up to the left? So positive versus negative slope. But we also talked about slope as a fraction, or rise over, over run. So rise over run is usually what we use to remind ourselves that if you're moving from one point to another point on the line, you're going to first move up whatever number is up here, and then you're going to move over, either in the left or the right direction, the number that's in the denominator. So that's rise over run, which is slope. And you guys already have that formula. We talked about that back in chapter 4 to calculate out the slope of the line, right? Okay, then the second parameter, which is b, that talks about or represents the y-intercept. So that is exactly where your graph of your line crosses the y-axis. And if you know these two numbers, the slope and the y-intercept, you can graph any line on your Cartesian coordinate plane. So let's do an example. So if we have y equals 2/3 x plus 1, and they ask us to graph, the first thing we're going to do is identify the b. So there's b, which is 1. And you're going to make a point on the y-axis where y is equal to 1. So that would be right here. Okay, so there's the first point. So it's kind of like the starting point. From this point, we are going to use our slope, which are basically driving directions, telling us exactly where to go to get to the next point on our line. So remember, rise over run. So 2 is how much we're going to count up, and 3 is how much we're going to count to the right. So we're going to go 1, 2 up, and then we count over 3 units, 1, 2, 3, and we make our second point. Now, technically, we know from geometry you only need 2 points to make a line. Some people do like to do it a third time in order to get just to make sure that you have everything on the same line, you haven't made any mistakes. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go the other direction, because sometimes, depending on where your B is, maybe your B is really high up here, and you've run out of room to be able to move in the positive direction. You can always go in the opposite direction. So that basically means make the 2 negative and the 3 negative. So I could go down 2 and then to the left 1, 2, 3. And I should get another point that's exactly on my line. Okay? So, oh yeah, I forgot that. Okay. Anyway, once we have our points, whether you want 2 or 3 or more, then you can just take a ruler, connect the dots, and you get your line. So it's as easy as that. It's not too bad, right? Okay. The other option for graphing lines would be to figure out exactly what the x and y intercepts are, and then graph those. So, oops, I forgot to get rid of that. There we go. So what is the x-intercept? What is the y-intercept? Well, these are the points where the graph crosses the x and y axis. So for the y-intercept, that means the value of x, the x-coordinate has to be 0. So if you plugged in 0 for x and solved for y, you get the y-intercept. And likewise, the x-intercept, that's going to be where y is 0. So if you plugged in 0 for y into your equation and solve for x, you're going to get the x-intercept. So if you can get these 2 points fairly easily, you can plot them, connect the dots, and you get your line. All right, now there are 2 special cases of lines. There's a line that's going to be horizontal, like this, where it has y equals 2. If you look at this equation, we're not used to thinking of this being an equation of a line because there's no x. But when there is no x, that means x can be whatever it wants to be. but y is always going to be 2. So that means that, I could have the x be 3 and y would be 2. I could say x is 0 and y is 2. I could say x is -5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and y is still 2. So you get all of these points that make this horizontal line. So if I draw this in, there it is. Okay, so the equation of a horizontal line is going to look like something y equals some number. Okay, so what does a vertical line look like? Well, that's going to look like x equals some number. So x equals -3. So that means that no matter what I do, -3, right? 1, 2, 3. The x-coordinate is going to be -3, and the y-coordinate can be whatever it wants. So I could be all the way up here at +4. I could be down here at -3. Doesn't matter. But the x-coordinate is always going to be the same. So I can draw that in, and I get a nice vertical line. Okay, so that's enough to start us off with the basics of graphing lines. Hopefully that's not as bad as you were envisioning. We'll see when we get to further sections, right? All right, see you later.